You know that feeling when you read something and you have to stop, put your phone down, stare into the middle distance, and say out loud, "No, no, that can't be real"? That was my morning. Because if this story were a movie, you'd say it was too on the nose, too cynical, too obvious about how power actually works. And yet here we are, a paper trail, offshore wires, a witness locked in a cell, and a system that looks an awful lot less like justice and a lot more like a vending machine where the biggest bills get the biggest outcomes. Here's the fictional scenario. All of it. Completely fictional, obviously. But let's just imagine for a second that somewhere in America there's a protected witness. We'll call them Witness 14 because nothing screams "this person matters" like being reduced to a number. This witness comes forward with information that could blow up an entire network of powerful people. Not one bad actor, not one rogue official, a network. The kind of network that doesn't leave fingerprints, doesn't send emails, doesn't text anything it wouldn't want read aloud in a courtroom. The kind of network that uses favors instead of orders and money instead of memos. Now imagine that this witness does everything right, cooperates, hands over documents, sits for interviews, follows instructions, and then suddenly, without a trial, without a real hearing, without even the decency of pretending there's urgency, this witness is thrown into detention. No bail, no timeline, just gone. Vanished into the system, and everyone watching goes, "Wait, what?" Because that's not how it's supposed to work. That's not how the rules are written. That's not even how the loopholes usually work. So people start asking questions, quietly at first, lawyers whispering to each other in hallways, journalists poking around and getting doors politely but firmly closed in their faces. And then someone finds something, not a rumor, not a tip from a guy who knows a guy. Numbers, dates, banks, wires, the least sexy but most terrifying thing in the world. Paper. In this fictional universe, the money doesn't come in a suitcase. It never does. It moves through shell companies with patriotic names and websites that don't load. It bounces from one jurisdiction to another like it's playing hopscotch with international law. Singapore, Cyprus, the Caymans, places where the sun is bright, the beaches are clean, and questions take a very long time to answer. And one of those wires, just one, lands 48 hours before the detention order. $2 million and change, not a round number, a specific one, the kind accountants love and criminals think makes it look legitimate. And just for fun, because this is fiction and fiction is often crueler than reality, the account it lands in isn't even in the judge's name. It's connected to a trust, and that trust is controlled by a relative, someone with no obvious income, no visible career, no reason on earth to be handling millions of dollars other than proximity, plausible deniability with a family discount. Now here's where the story stops being subtle. Because imagine that buried in the transfer details, in the little memo line most people never look at, there's a reference code, something bureaucratic, something clinical, something like WCP 14, Witness Containment Protocol. 14. That's not just sloppy, that's arrogant. That's the confidence of people who believe these records will never see daylight. Because why would they? Who's going to look? Who's going to care? Who's going to connect the dots when the dots are spread across continents and protected by silence? In our fictional story, someone does connect them. Someone with access. Someone with authority. Someone who looks at this and decides that pretending not to see it would make them complicit. And instead of sending it quietly to a committee where it can be buried under procedure and scheduling conflicts, they go public. They stand in front of cameras. They hold up the documents. And they say the 7 most dangerous words in a corrupt system. Here is the proof. That's when the room goes quiet. Because corruption is one thing people can argue about in the abstract. Everyone agrees it's bad. Nobody agrees where it lives. But a wire transfer is hard to spin. Routing numbers don't care about ideology. Timestamps don't watch cable news. Money either moved or it didn't. And in this story, it moved. Now imagine the reaction. Half the country says, "Finally." The other half says, "This is an attack on the system." And that's always the tell, by the way, when accountability is framed as danger, when exposing wrongdoing is treated as more threatening than the wrongdoing itself. Suddenly the conversation isn't about why a witness is in jail. It's about decorum, process, tone. Was this the right way to do it? Couldn't this have been handled quietly? Quietly. That's my favorite word in these moments. Because quietly is how this always happens. Quietly is how witnesses disappear. Quietly is how files get sealed. Quietly is how careers survive things that would destroy anyone without the right last name or connections. Quietly is the sound of a cell door closing when no one is looking. And then the defenses start. Not denials. Notice that. Not, this money doesn't exist. Not, that account isn't connected to me. Instead, it's, this is politically motivated. This undermines confidence in our institutions. This is dangerous. Which is fascinating because no one ever seems worried about confidence in institutions when the institution is destroying a single person's life in silence. In this fictional scenario, the judge doesn't step aside, doesn't recuse, shows up to work like nothing happened. Which is bold. I mean, that's Olympic-level confidence. Or desperation. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Lawyers in the courtroom exchange looks like they're all trapped in a very expensive improv exercise where no one is allowed to acknowledge the elephant wearing a robe. Meanwhile, the witness is still inside, still waiting, still paying the price for telling the truth in a system that apparently charges interest on honesty. Emergency motions get filed. Analysts go on TV. Everyone suddenly becomes very concerned about due process, which is great, except for the part where it took a scandal for anyone to notice it was missing. And then the other detail comes out. Because of course there's another detail. There's always another detail. That same source account? It didn't just send one wire. It sent 12. Different amounts, different shells, same origin, same pattern. A dozen payments, a dozen recipients, a list. And now the story isn't about one judge. It's about a marketplace. About whether outcomes were for sale and whether the price list has been circulating for years. That's the part that makes people nervous. Not that one person might be corrupt. That's manageable. That's a bad apple story. This is a bad orchard story. This is the realization that the system didn't just fail. It might have been rented out. In our fictional world, historians start drawing parallels. Commentators bring up old scandals where judges sold sentences or freedom for cash, and everyone says, that was different. It always is, until it isn't. Because the common thread isn't the crime, it's the certainty. The certainty that no one would look, that no one would dare. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night about this imaginary scenario. The witness isn't special, not famous, not powerful, just someone who crossed the wrong people. Which means if this can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. And that's when the story stops being about law and starts being about fear. Because fear is what keeps systems like this alive. Fear of speaking. Fear of seeing too much. Fear of ending up as a number instead of a name. The fallout in this fictional universe is chaos. Cases get questioned. Convictions get appealed. Trust evaporates. People who were comfortable yesterday start booking flights today. And suddenly everyone wants to talk about reform, which is always what happens after the damage is done. Transparency, oversight, new rules, all the things that might have helped before the cell door closed. And the final image in this story, the one that sticks with you, isn't the press conference or the documents or the outrage. It's the witness, sitting in a room, waiting to find out whether the truth was worth it. Waiting to see if the system that crushed them will now correct itself or just quietly move on. So if this were a movie, this is the part where the music swells and the hero wins. But this isn't a movie. It's a mirror. And what it's reflecting isn't comfortable. It's asking whether justice is blind or just very good at looking the other way. Whether we actually believe in equal treatment or just like the idea of it when it doesn't cost us anything. In our fictional world, more names are coming, more documents, more uncomfortable questions. And the people who benefited from silence are suddenly very loud about process, which tells you everything you need to know. If you care about stories like this, if you care about whether power can be challenged or only exposed after it's done its damage, then keep watching. Because the scariest part of this fictional scenario isn't the money or the jail cell. It's how plausible it all feels. And that's the part we should never get used to.